On this episode of Roadkill's Junkyard Gold, we're back in the Mexico desert playing with blocks. Chevrolet small block and big block V8s. I'm Steve Mignonti, hot rod historian, author, and lover of all things cars. I travel all across the country to uncover the forgotten and hidden gems of the automotive world. This is Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. Chevy muscle cars came in two varieties: high-winding small blocks and stump-pulling big blocks. On this episode of Roadkill's Junkyard Gold, we're back in Santa Teresa, New Mexico at Joe Duran's Bowtie Performance. Within this horde of classic Chevys, we're on the hunt for great examples of small block and big block V8 powered bow ties. Let's dig in. Here it is, man. This is beautiful. A 68 Vertigo Green Pontiac GTO. This was Motortrend magazine's Car of the Year for 1968, and a totally new style known as the Coke bottle design, quite different from the 64 through 67 GTO. This one here does not have the optional Endura front bumper, nor does it have the hideaway headlights. Again, an option. Another special option is right here on the hood. This is RPO 704, the hood-mounted tachometer. This arrived on GTOs in 1967 as a dealer-installed item, but for 1968, it became a factory assembly line piece. The price was $63.19. It was a great item because as you go down the road power shifting your GTO, you didn't have to look down or through the gauges at the tachometer. You'd look through the windshield, and there it was right in front of you. Now, these tachometers, strangely enough, were never picked up by Chevrolet or by the Olds 442. You'd think, an SS-396 would be a very popular option. Never happened. The only other GM muscle car that did use this, 1970 through 72 Buick Skylark GSX. But wow, here it is, man. RPO 704, hood-mounted tack in the boneyard. Ooh, a row of F-body Firebirds. 1980 Firebird, face only a bandit could love. Ooh, a 1974 Firebird, probably a Trans Am with the round headlights. Buick Grand National 15x7 steel wheels on a Nova Custom, same bolt pattern, they bolt up. Pretty heavy wheel though. Oh, and the domed hood on the 68 Impala tells us this might be something very cool. Yes, this is an SS-427 Impala, a very special full-size big block Chevy muscle car. A lot of folks think that muscle cars have to be an intermediate-sized car, like a Chevelle with a big block engine. It's not true. Between 1961 and 69, the Super Sport Impalas could be had with big blocks, and they were every bit as much a muscle car as any intermediate-sized car. Now, the SS-427 was RPO Z28, and it was available on any V8-powered two-door Impala in 1968. The price was $542.45, but it included many special items. These domed hoods signify you had a 427 and nothing less. Up on the front, there would be an SS-427 emblem, and on the fenders here, the three chrome gills were also only SS-427 spec. Okay, well, the engine's missing, and it's often the case with these big block cars. There were two engines possible. The base was the L36, which made 385 horsepower. It had 10 1/4 to 1 compression, a hydraulic camshaft, and a Rochester quadrijet 4-barrel on top of an iron intake manifold. For an additional $447, you could have stepped up to the L72, which made 425 horsepower by way of 11 1/4 to 1 compression, a solid lifter 520 lift camshaft, an aluminum intake manifold, and an 855 CFM Holley 4-barrel carburetor. But those engines were very rare, and only 562 people bought the L72 in their 1968 SS-427. Now, one thing I see here under the hood is the C60 air conditioning unit. Now, the high revving nature of that 427 with its solid lifters could damage the air conditioning compressor. So, with the air conditioner on this one, we know this was built with the base L36 385 horse 427. That's still a bunch of engine. Now, the thing about the SS-427 option is that it wasn't a specific model, so the VIN and the style code will not identify the car, but what you have to look for is style code 164, which at least opens the door to the car being a V8 two-door Impala. But with the SS-427 equipment seen on the outside of this car, to me, there's no doubt this is the real thing. Believe it or not, the base transmission in the SS-427 was the M13 3-speed manual. But for an additional $237, you could step up to the M40 Turbo 400 3-speed automatic, which most people did. But we see something here, the $185 Muncie 4-speed. Now, the transmission itself is gone, but here's the console, and here's the shift quadrant right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, reverse. And again, a full-size Chevy like this with a 4-speed and a big block. This is absolutely a muscle car. The vast majority of full-size Chevys like this were automatic grocery getters. This is a really sexy car. Now, a lot of folks assume that Super Sport Impalas automatically came with bucket seats. Well, that was the case early on, but in 1968, you paid extra for the A51 Strato bucket seats. Also present is the U63 AM push-button radio. Below it, something pretty rare. This is the remains of the U57 8-track stereo tape system. In 1968, the SS-427 was available in 3 body styles, the convertible, of which 178 were built, the sports coupe with a fastback roof, of which 880 were built, and this, the custom coupe, with its more formal notchback. Only 727 SS-427 customers went with this body style, a little more formal than the fastback. As a mold-breaking, full-sized, big block 4-speed Chevy muscle car, this car deserves to be restored. It's very rare. Now, while the engine and tranny are long gone, we can whip up some date code correct replacements, paint it ermine white, and while it might not be as quick or fast as the Crusher Impala, it would probably run some low 14s and be a lot of fun to drive, especially with that 4-speed stick. '70 or so Chevelle. Ooh, a 67 300 Chevelle, 4-door, the bottom of the barrel. Oh man, torque tubes. You know, most folks think about Chevy rear-wheel drive vehicles with leaf springs. They assume it has a rear axle and a live drive shaft. Well, not so fast. Before 1955, Chevy passenger cars, like Buicks, used a thing called a torque tube. Here we have it here. This is not a drive shaft. This thing does not rotate. The drive shaft's actually inside of it. And this is what you'll find under 1954 back Chevrolets, pickup trucks, and passenger cars, except Corvette. But something that's kind of weird about these is the way the leaf springs are attached to the rear axle. On torque tube cars, there's this pivot right here, which allows the rear suspension to compress and come back without binding and shoving the torque tube into the transmission and damaging it. So while it looks like something you might swap under your 55 Chevy or something like that, think twice. Torque tube is totally different. '70 El Camino, probably 307, maybe a 350. '67 Malibu, different tail on this thing. Oh man, and the word super should be joined by Super Sport, and yep, this is a 1967 SS-396 Chevelle. It's one thing to have the horsepower and torque of a big block Chevrolet in a full-sized Impala. When you take that same engine and put it into a mid-sized Chevelle like this, things get serious. And even though the SS-396 was 31 cubes shy of the SS-427, these things weighed 500 pounds less. Now, the Chevelle was offered with the SS-396 package between 1966 and '72 in various forms. To find out if you have a real one, you go to the trim tag where you want to see style code 138. Now, one thing you got to watch out for, in 1967, the same style code 138 was used on Chevelle Concourse 4-door station wagons. However, if you read the full style number, the wagon reads out 13835, whereas the SS-396 coupe reads out 13817. So a lot of guys get lazy and say, yeah, I got a real 138 car. Well, which one is it? A Concourse wagon or a Chevelle SS-396? You got to know the difference. Okay, let's keep looking at the trim tag. We see 747 tells us this car had a red bench seat interior, and the paint code here, CC, means it was ermine white, which we still see traces of on the outside. Other things I see here are drum brakes up front. Now, for 1967, Chevrolet finally launched the J52 optional disc brakes, and it was about time. With these 9.5-inch drum brakes on the front of a 350 horsepower muscle car, they borderlined on the dangerous. Maybe this car was a drag racer. The reason is I see remnants of a tow bar bracket right here. More than likely, this car was towed to the drag strip, and I understand why the drum brakes are here instead of the discs. Deal is, the disc brakes had very heavy castings. They weighed about 25 pounds more than the drums. So if you wanted to go from point A to point B as quickly as possible, you wanted the lightest parts you could get. That meant drum brakes. So it could well be this car is shaping up to be an L78, which was the top dog, 375 horsepower, 396. Below that, with the L34, which was a 350 horsepower 396, and below that the L35, the base 325 horsepower 396. So again, 3 flavors of 396 available in 67. Which one you have? Nothing on the cowl tells you. It's all about paperwork, window stickers, bills of sale, and that stuff ain't here right now, so we have to go with the clues. The base transmission in the SS-396 Chevelle was a 3-speed manual with either the column shifter or a floor shifter. What I love on this one here is the clutch pedal and the factory floor shift hold. I'm going to bet this one had the optional M20 wide ratio or M21 close ratio Muncie 4-speed, which was a $184 upcharge. And one thing I'm not seeing that I like are the welded-on brackets on top of the drive shaft tunnel that would signify this car had a center console. A bit of frill that you don't really need in a drag car. Likewise, we know that the trim code 747 tells us this car had a red bench seat interior. Here's the back seat, which is red vinyl. The thing about the bench is that it actually weighs about 50 pounds less than the bucket seats. So this car is shaping up as sort of a lightweight drag strip special. One thing I don't see here is the blinker tachometer. I would bet at some point in time there was an aftermarket tach screwed in here someplace, because you don't go drag racing with a stick shift without a tachometer. Another detail that speaks to this car's drag racing past are these wide 60 drag tires on the back. These are L6015s with a 10-inch tread mounted on Anson 15 by 8 or 9-inch wheels. Now, 1967 Chevelle SS-396 totals were 63,006 cars, down 9,266 cars from 1966. But you have to remember, 1967, the Chevelle had more competition than ever. Cars like the Coronet RT, the Plymouth GTX joined the scene, not to mention the pony car Camaro and Firebird from General Motors. But even with that competition, 63,000 cars is not a small number. And these cars were popular then as they are now. With its ermine white paint and red interior, who knows, maybe it was ordered new by a dentist. So I would have to restore it right back to factory stock. And it might be an L78. I would say let's make it one. I'd build up a 396 with a solid cam, 11.5 to 1 compression, a big Winters aluminum intake manifold, 850 Holley on top, put some 373 gears in a 12 bolt, and go pulling teeth, GTO teeth. Oldsmobile, probably a 71, 72, formal roof. Chevy pickup, step side. A lot of Camaros in this yard, but I think I need a Mustang. I found a Mustang. Chevy 2 wagon here. Be a fun little car with an LS1. 2-door Nova, hardtop, best kind. Sliced and diced Nova right there. Appreciate the view, Mustang. I get to look down inside these cars. Can't do that on foot, that's for sure. Firebird over here to the right. Oh, 427. If this is what it claims to be, this is going to be very cool. Let's see if it's here. Yes. This is a 427 Chevy station wagon. Now, you usually think about the 427 being in things like tri-power Corvettes or Copo Camaros, Copo Chevelles. Well, they also put them in station wagons. For 1969, Chevrolet released the 427 in 2 potencies for station wagons. The L36 with 390 horsepower or the LS1 with 335 horsepower. To find out which one we have to go to the machine pad on the block and see the suffix code. Okay, LE. This is the LS1. Now, the LS1 nomenclature we know of today, those aluminum Gen 3 engines, it's not new. It was applied to this engine in 1969. Now, the thing about the LS1, they had single exhaust from the factory, which tells you they were a pretty low, mild performance engine. How good is this engine for scavenging? Here's the deal. If you had a 307 Nova or a 6-cylinder Camaro and you plug this motor in with no changes, you'd know the difference. You'd have yourself a high 14-second tire smoker. Not a bad engine. But if you're used to big blocks, this engine doesn't really have much you can use. It's got small port, small valve heads, very mild camshaft, a 2-bolt 427 block, and 10 1/4 to 1 compression. So this engine, this LS1 427, is really not something you would try to build into a bigger, better engine. You could do it, but you'd be better off with a 4-bolt main block. But amazing. A 427 wagon in a junkyard. Cool stuff. Nifty, a Graham Brothers fire truck. Graham Brothers built trucks for Dodge Brothers till 1930. K5 Blazer two-wheel drive. Yeah, some Blazers were two-wheelers, not all four. Malibu flat hood car. Camaro Z28 reborn. This one here is a 1980. We know that because of the air induction hood. These were seen on all 1980 and 81 Camaro Z28 only. It worked like this. The gas pedal has an electric solenoid, and at wide open throttle, a switch kicked on, which opens flapper valves, which then admit cool air into the 4-barrel carburetor, giving the engine an extra 5 to maybe 10 horsepower. Drive down a road, bury the gas, the doors would open up, you could actually watch it through the windshield. Other details are front fenders with air extractor vents on the sides. And these things actually do work to prevent nose lift at high speeds. And 1980 also brought these 5-spoke 15x7 aluminum wheels, replacing the turbine-style wheels used in 1979. And a funny thing about Camaro, unlike Firebird, which eventually grew to include the square headlights, which were all the rage in Detroit from 1975 on, Camaro stayed with round headlights right to the bitter end in 1981. The 82 Camaro, the Gen 3, came out with rectangular headlights, but a whole different car. Okay, let's look under the hood and see what we have. Okay, a whole lot of nothing. Well, 1980 Z28s came with one of two engines. Cars sold outside of California got the LM1 350 with 190 horsepower, Rochester quadrajet, dual exhaust, funneled through a single catalytic converter, but the intake manifold went from iron to aluminum in 1981, which would make the car slightly cooler. Great engine, not quite the LT1 of 1970 with its 360 horsepower rating, but for 1980, a pretty potent power plant. Cars sold in California, unfortunately, got the LG4 305 with a mere 155 horsepower, but at least California Z28 customers got a $50 credit for the smaller engine. This Z28 also has the standard heavy-duty disc brakes and a high-capacity master cylinder we see right here. Also standard on Z28 was fast ratio power steering and the massive front anti-roll bar, bigger than any other Camaro roll bar, matched by one in the back, which gave the Camaro its nickname, the Hugger. In 1980, the only cars that would out-handle this Z28 would have been a Corvette or Firebird Trans Am. Okay, as much as I'd like to see the 4-speed transmission, this one has the MX-1 Turbo 350 automatic, which costs $358, a full $215 more than the 4-speed. And of course, California customers got the bone again. No 4-speeds and only the automatic with the 305. 1980 also brought the 85-mile-an-hour speedometer seen on all American cars, part of the Drive 55 Save Gas campaign. And the tachometer here reads to 5,000 RPM. That's the red line, basically a symptom of the LM1 350's hydraulic camshaft and nature as a low RPM torquer, not so much a high RPM screamer. One thing that's not so cool maybe is the steering wheel. This was first seen in the 1971 Vega GT and also in 1976 Corvettes, where a lot of Corvette owners complained that they were driving around a $7,000 car with a $3,000 steering wheel. Slightly changed for the Z28 with the addition of fake molded-in cotton windings to give it better grip. But it's hard black plastic and frankly kind of cheap compared to the rosewood wheels we used in earlier Z28s in the 60s. This 80 Z28 is a member of the second-generation Camaro family made between 1970 and 1981, and none of them came as a convertible. Well, by 1978, customer complaints were so loud that Chevrolet came out with the CC1 T-top option. Now, in truth, Pontiac Trans Ams had this about 2 years before Camaro, but it works like this. You pull this handle here, and within about 4 seconds, you have a semi-convertible. The only downside is these things were easily stolen. And on the other side of the coin, T-top Camaros were not popular with serious road racers because the open roof somewhat compromised the structural integrity of the body shelf. And here on the tail, we see the classic second-generation D80 trunk spoiler known as the ducktail. This was designed by Mark Donohue, Chevrolet's star SCCA road racer. These develop about 50 pounds of downforce over 100 miles per hour, so it really was functional. The 1970s were a terrible time for high performance. Chevrolet famously dropped the Z28 for 1975 and 76. They thought the performance era was over. Meanwhile, the Pontiac Trans Am took off. Chevrolet recognized the error of their ways and brought the Z28 back. Now, it wasn't a serious muscle car like the cars from the 60s were, but for its day, it was pretty quick. I dare say, with Trans Ams of the late 70s now selling for $50,000 and more, the time has come for the Z28 to do the same thing. I would take this car and restore it right back to LM1 350 transmission status, make the air door work, I'd paint it blue again, get the graphics on it, hit the road, and maybe make some money in the process. The Chevelle SS-396 was one of the most popular Chevy muscle cars of all time. How can we tell if it's really a big block or a small block car? Well, this one here is a 68. And we can confirm this is a 396 car by simply looking at the cowl tag and looking at the first 3 digits on the style line, 138. This car had a 396 up front, no doubt. 1969, here's another one. Something changed. Chevrolet demoted the SS-396 from a specific model to an option group on any V8 Malibu two-door. So the 138 vanished, replaced by 136, which opens the door to a V8 car. From there, they added the Z15 SS-396 package on top of a V8 car. So this doesn't prove anything other than the fact this was once a V8 car. Which V8? We don't know. So now we have to open up our eyes and use our powers of observation. On this one, I do see power-boosted front disc brakes, a front sway bar. I see fast ratio power steering. What I don't see is any kind of the extra chrome trim added to lesser Malibus. So it's likely this was an SS-396. This one here, 68, we know it definitely was. So you gotta watch out on these 69s. You really have to have some paperwork to verify Super Sport Big Block status. Buick Skylark, X-Body, Pontiac Ventura. Again, these are similar to the Nova. 67 Chevelle, small block car, not a Super Sport, another small block Malibu. Oh man, this here is a very cool car. 1967 Impala Fastback, and I'm seeing dual exhaust on this thing. It's probably a big block car. 1967 was the first year for the 5th design cycle of the Chevy Impala, which was first seen in 1958. This one here is one of the more successful full-size fastbacks that didn't look like an afterthought. The hood, that's a very special thing. That tells us this is an Impala SS-427. Now, 1966 was the debut year for the 7-liter 427, which was Chevrolet's ultimate battle engine in the muscle car wars. But for 1967, Chevy threw it a party by creating the SS-427, which was essentially a showcase for the 427 engine. Now, one thing specific to all SS-427s is this power dome hood. And in the middle, these 3 fake gills, they're a reference to the 427 Tri-Power L71 Corvette engine that was going to be offered in these cars as an option. And that's why we have 3 vents in this chrome insert to replicate the 3 two-barrel Hollies. But as it turned out, that engine was canceled for the Impala, only used in Corvettes in 1967. So under the hood of this thing, all you'll find is the L36 single 4-barrel 427, but with 385 horsepower, that's still plenty of power. Okay, it's gone. That's the problem with a lot of these full-size 427 cars. Hot rodders would target these vehicles, buy them as used cars, yank the 427, put it in a Camaro, and then throw away the body. It was kind of a shame. Now this one is totally loaded. I see the C60 air conditioner and 40 power steering, which was a $94.80 upcharge. Down low in the engine bay, I see the remains of the factory exhaust manifolds, and these same manifolds were used on all engines from the 396 two-barrel in 1969 all the way up to the 427 Tri-Powers. They're very efficient, high-flow cast iron, almost a header. Also looking here, we see J52 power front disc brakes. And one thing about those 11-inch rotors, they were too big to fit inside of the 14-inch rims that were standard on Impalas. So for the first time in 1967, when you got disc brakes, you also got the 15 by 6-inch rally wheels we see on this car here. Now these rallies would go on to be a staple, a classic Chevrolet performance icon wheel throughout the 1970s into the 80s. We see them here for the first time in 1967. Okay, just like the Chevelle SS, the Impala SS did not come standard with bucket seats in 1967. You paid an extra $158 for the A51 Strato buckets, which we have here. Between the seats, I see this. This is the automatic shifter for the optional M40 Turbo 400 automatic transmission. Now, the beauty of the Turbo 400 was that it was the first 3-speed automatic transmission from General Motors with an aluminum case and first available in 1967. For 66, the Power Glide 2-speed crap automatic was the only transmission available in an Impala. In fact, the Turbo 400 lived on into the 1980s and 90s, transforming into the 4L80E 4-speed automatic that we love and know today, but we see it right here for the first time. To keep pace with the 460 foot-pounds of torque generated by the 427, these cars get a special 12-bolt rear axle. The small block cars got a 10-bolt rear axle. The difference is the ring gear diameter. The 10-bolt is 8.2 inches, 12-bolt had an 8.8-inch ring gear, stronger, bigger, tougher. Now, this car being a first-year Z24 SS-427, it's essentially a very special car because it's Chevrolet celebrating the 427 Big Block. Never before has a car been centered around an engine. I don't dare insult this car with modifications. I would complement it with a restoration. I'd respray it mountain green. Now, with the original engine long gone, let's maybe sneak it up to 502 or 540 cubic inches, but make it look like a 427. Switch out the Turbo 400 for a 4-speed manual transmission, and then hit the road and really just enjoy the beautiful, sleek fastback styling and show the world the SS-427 package. It's a beautiful car. Well, that's our look at Chevy V8 powered classics. We saw how the small block added excitement to that 1980 Camaro Z28. Now, while small blocks are fun, the big block powered SS-396 Chevelle and that pair of SS-427s stand ready with over 400 foot-pounds of torque for tire-smoking thrills. Either way, you can't go wrong with a Chevy V8. Until next time, hasta mañana. Also see the N33 tilt column here, which was an $81 option, made life a little bit easier. Isn't that right, little puppy dog? That's right, that's right. And if you wanted your Camaro with a convertible top, you were out of luck after 1969. Isn't that right, baby? You want a convertible? I do too. So what we do is we're gonna move this little lever here, and we can open the top, and we're going down the road in a convertible in style, right, puppy?